67 years ago. So 2/3 of a century later, I think we need to take it.
We have found advanced technology that's light years ahead of ours.
I think the other important part of this, which I think is very key, is the testimony and information about the physics of the so-called scalar and neutrino light systems, which we have had people there at the South Pole Raytheon station. Those systems are both tracking in deep space, but are also weapon systems. And there is a huge problem with those sort of technologies being used by rogue elements, not being okayed by the international community or even the Pentagon and White House and Congress. So those sorts of technologies need to be put on a short leash very, very quickly. There's a universal right to self-defense. And I tell people when they all this obsession, of course, it's more the human narcissism. I say, if you want to know where the threat in the universe is, go to a mirror and look at it. It's what humans are doing. It's not what these civilizations are doing. By the way, these civilizations are so advanced technologically, but also socially and spiritually, that they're very, very peaceful. And why? If you had the consciousness of what humans have now, where we fight over every scrap of land and aiming at each other, now take that mindset, but now instead of their weapons, put in, faster than the speed of light technologies. Those civilizations would extinguish themselves in a nanosecond. So I think part of this, we need some scientific literacy so we get out of this sort of mythology of the world's nonsense. But on the other hand, I think that we're at risk for these civilizations at a certain point having this very rogue group, illegal, run through a red line. I call it the extraterrestrial red line.
The media distracts us with false stories about extraterrestrial activities.
How far can we go doing this sort of reckless, dangerous behavior before they have to clip the wings of those folks? Now, the danger and the reason they're not doing it is that if the extraterrestrial civilizations did it, it would be portrayed by the lame media and these spin doctors in these covert programs as an alien invasion, when in reality it isn't. In fact, even the witnesses we had come out in 2001, a couple of them were at facilities where ET craft went in and disabled some. And they felt that the ETs were protecting us from ourselves. But then there were charlatans in the media and the UFO community that took that same testimony and rated our witnesses and spun it into Alien Invasion Week on the History Channel. So here's the problem. These civilizations are very smart. They don't want to have to intervene. They want humans to fix the problem because this is our planet. So my exhortation to our leaders and to the public is we need to fix this problem before it gets any further out of control. And it's been out of control for over 60 years. I think one of the most interesting revelations about that's coming out is the extent to which we have these top secret whistleblowers, of which at the conference we only had about 0.5%, right? Mm-hmm. And imagine that if there's a proper investigation or our civilian RICO lawsuit, and all these can be put under oath and it comes out, imagine the impact that will have. I very much hope that the Congress, and I know many members of Congress and staffers watched, if not in present, remotely, because it was streamed, as you know, that they will then, pick up the ball from here. Because look, we're a private civilian organization. We have no governmental authority. I can provide evidence and we can provide perspective and advice. That's the best I can do. I don't have any legal authority at all. Other than just like you or me, I'm just a regular guy, a civilian. Enough evidence has been presented there for them to take the ball and run. And I think the other one that's sort of shocking for people is this witness, Marine, who saw that these technologies were being used in man-made anti-gravity devices involved in clandestine and illegal operations, and he was threatened with being. And so this is a theme that also triggers a RICO action and that is the intimidation and extra legal or illegal people or threatening of people. So I think that is also one of the big headline events, because I think that tells the public this is serious business and it needs a serious response from the authorities, including law enforcement.
Ancient civilizations had profound thoughts far beyond our current understanding.
Well, one thing I learned, which was I didn't understand scientifically, we understand it now, and we touch on it in the documentary Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, is that these civilizations, which are hundreds of thousands to millions of years more advanced than we are, have pretty much perfected what Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink, where he has a company trying to figure out how you can think to your computer, and it does things without wires. Now, as you know, Dr. John at Princeton had experimental electronic devices that people could think to and they would react to the thought. And this has been very well reproduced all over the world. What these civilizations have are extremely accurate interfaces with consciousness and directed thought that pick up the thought as clearly as you and I are talking on this electromagnetic signal. So that's how that whole event happened. It was all based in consciousness and thought. Now, that sounds like something way out there, except when you start talking to people at the CIA, like Dr. Russell Targ, who's a laser physicist for Lockheed, who for 20 years was at the CIA doing consciousness studies, using consciousness to spy on the Soviet Union. So everyone thinks that this is very fringe. It isn't. It's only fringe because the mainstream media ridicules it. But in reality, everyone at a senior level of the intelligence community knows this is real. So I stumbled across it, and then I realized that these guys, these ET civilizations, have that ability, but I didn't understand how it worked. It was all kind of a mystery to me at age 18. Subsequently, though, I realized that the reason they were wanting me to understand it was, I guess they figured because I had had some kind of sighting and contact and interest in them, but I was also experiencing these higher states of consciousness, that maybe they could, develop something with me as a young man, 18-year-old guy, where I could use it to set up and educate the public about making contact. Now, that was in 1973. I didn't do anything with it for a long time because I didn't know what to do with it until 1990. And we started the CE5 contact protocols, which now, of course, we have hundreds of thousands of people around the world doing it. But it was quite a journey for me as a young boy, doing that. And as you know, last summer, Demi Lovato and her friends on her birthday had the CE5 contact app, and they were practicing it. And they had this amazing ET craft come over. They all saw, it was very exciting. And they put it on Instagram.
We are facing an existential threat from secrets hidden in plain sight.
So what I'm trying to do is have people understand that you don't have to be some kind of, Uri Geller or mystic or CIA remote viewer to do this. Every single person who's conscious and awake can connect to that quiet state of mind and do this. Because these civilizations, if you're doing this with the right attitude, let's say, and philosophy, and you're not, afraid and all that kind of silly things, they're going to pick that up and something will happen. Not every time, but they're very interested in humans going into this sort of new understanding of the cosmos, where we realize we and the cosmos are awake, and we're all sort of part of this conscious hologram known as reality. And that's really what they want us to understand, because that's the foundation of becoming interstellar. And our civilization is at the brink of going from a tribalistic warring civilization to an interplanetary one. But to do that, you have to have some foundation in understanding what is the point where we have something in common. Well, it's not our own humanity. That's humanism, because these are not humans. It has to be something more transcendent, deeper. And that's this conscious field that's universal. Right? I call it universal consciousness or cosmic consciousness. And that they understand very well. It's not just a philosophy, it's actually an operating system. Like your computer has an operating system. This understanding of cosmic consciousness and the fact that the universe is a conscious hologram where everything's connected to each other, like in physics in a hologram, that they understand, but they also know that we have to not only understand it intellectually, but begin to actually, walk that talk. Well, I think there's been an interest in this planet for millions of years. Okay, I don't think this is new. I think what became very much where we became a planet of concern, like our State Department has nations of concern, is that in the 40s, when we detonated the first atomic, that sent up a big red flag over this planet going, warning, this civilization can not only be at a point now where they can destroy all life on this planet, but shortly thereafter, we started going into space with Sputnik. We could become an existential threat to other peaceful planets, some of whom do not even have a concept of conflict, we've learned. So I think that we were viewed, it's funny because in the media in Hollywood and the internet and the whole UFO subculture, it's always, why are the aliens here and the dangerous aliens and fear, fear, fear. I'm going, no, you got it upside down, dude. It's the other way around. We're the scary ones. We're the ones who hundreds of millions of people in the last century. And we're the ones who have thousands of thermonuclear weapons. And we're the ones going into space with weapon systems that are classified that I know about and been briefed on that are 1,000 times worse than a thermonuclear weapon. So this is the problem. The problem is that they know we have great potential and beauty within humanity, but they also know that some of the very powerful interests in the planet, what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, have this sort of addiction to viewing everything as a threat. They view anything they don't understand as a threat. And as one naval intelligence guy told me, I asked him, I said, why are we targeting these ET spacecraft and not including them occasionally? He says, because we view this as our planet. If they don't ask our military's permission, we're going to kill them and shoot them down. So that is how primitive and stupid the thinking is on that. People make it very complicated. When I've been at the Pentagon briefing 3-star generals and people like this, that is quite simply the mindset. So the general public doesn't understand that, as Danny Sheehan, who's this famous civil rights and constitutional attorney, said, if you're a hammer, the whole world's a nail. So in this case, if you're a military and you're oriented towards everything being a threat that you don't understand, then they're a threat. In reality, it's the other way around. The reason you see in the media coming out through the Senate Intelligence Committee, that they're trying to posit this as a national security threat because the ETs have been seen doing surveillance over our facilities and what have you. But that's not because they're a threat. If they wanted to take us out, it'd been done in 1945. The technologies they have could have terminated our civilization in an instant. But they're not. They have a Gandhian, like Gandhi or Christ or some enlightenment. They have that level of pacifism simply because they have pulled their punches, waiting for us, we the people, to resolve this problem over the last 60 or 70 years. So that's why I left my medical career a few years ago, is to resolve this crisis that is unacknowledged.
Dr. Stephen Greer warns us about UFOs is built on 3 big lies to keep us ignorant.
They always say, we don't know what these are. Well, that's a big lie. We've known what these objects are since the 40s and 50s. If you Google this subject, 90+% of everything that's going to come up is false information put in by the intelligence community to scare people and to make people think, brainwash them, that there's a threat, and there isn't a threat. The threat is from these covert programs. So the second big lie, I talked about the one, and that is they say, we don't know what these are when we've known what these are since the 40s and 50s. And there are 2 types of UFOs, man-made, which is the ones mostly seen, and extraterrestrial. And they're very different in how they look. You've seen the ET ones that are very seamless, come in and out of other dimensions. They're very almost magical. Whereas a man-made one has rivets and seams like a man-made thing. It's quite obvious that it's man-made, but it's silent. It's using anti-gravity propulsion, etc. But we've had those since October 1954. Now, the other big lie is that they say every single time that we don't have anything that can fly the way these videos that they're showing on CNN and the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that every one of those videos that have been released are our man-made UFOs? None of them are extraterrestrial. And some of those are extraterrestrial, but we also have that technology. Remember, in covert programs, we've spent several $1 trillion since the 40s and 50s studying captured ET craft. That is true. And they know they have studied this and have been able to sort of reproduce it a lot. It's called reverse engineering.
Yeah, so back engineering.
So the back engineering, reverse engineering has been going on since the 40s. They have made a lot of progress. That's all top secret. And the big reason it's top secret, two things. They want to preserve the element of surprise. They're using man-made UFOs with people that look made up to look like they're an alien going out abducting people. It sounds crazy. It is crazy. But that's literally what they've been doing since the 50s and 60s. Now, on top of that, and this is the big thing that concerns me, because my first great love was Earth, Gaia, this planet. And as a child, it was my real solace. I grew up in a very terrible family, very poor and very abused and all that. And I realized that the Earth was this beautiful, conscious being and alive and just magnificent. And we're destroying the planet using all these fossil fuels and all this stuff, power, when we've had the replacement for it since before I was born. So when just everyone listening, when you just Google these UFOs you see flying around, they're not using oil or jet fuel. Mm-hmm. They're using field propulsion. I won't bore people with the science behind it, but we know exactly how they're operating. My team knows exactly how they're operating. And the problem is that those systems would replace all the oil, gas, coal, and power in the world. So they want to keep that secret because the people who own all the industrial and money and the big, I call them the gangbanksters, they don't want this to come out because they're going to lose $800-900 trillion worth of assets. So they want to keep the world addicted to this stuff and only let out solutions like solar and wind, which I have a solar farm at my place, but it's not enough energy density to run the planet and fix the environment in time for my children and grandchildren and for you. Mm-hmm. And your children, if you have children. So I think it's really important for people to understand the solutions to these big justice, social justice, and environmental problems exist. But they're being kept away from the public because the foxes are guarding the hen house. The people who benefit from the current order and system don't want those technologies out. And, I have people I've worked with who have been trying to bring those technologies out. It's a very scary business, and it's real. And I tell people we're going to have to come together as a global community to correct that, because that's the big lie they keep saying every news story. The United States doesn't have anything that can fly like this. That is simply provably false. And then there's the third big lie, is the one I mentioned, that it's a threat to the national security, that these objects are a threat to the national security. Ironically, the ETs came in big numbers after we started detonating atomic, and because they saw that we were in trouble, but also that when we detonated an atomic, everyone knows what an electromagnetic pulse is. What they don't know is that there's also what are called scalar electromagnetic signals that go beyond the speed of light that damage ET worlds and damage.
No.
So we have done so much damage in the cosmos. So it's not just limited to where you see that blast. I think that people need to understand that the ETs are concerned about our hostility and our tendency to destroy the entire world. And they're here to help us, not to hurt us. They're here to assist and to understand, but they're not going to intervene. A lot of people say, well, why don't they just fly in Larry King, he asked me when I was on his show, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? I said, well, first of all, if they did, they'd be blown up. And secondly, they're expecting us, the children of the earth, to come together in peace, make contact with them, and fix these problems. Because if they were to come in and force a solution, it would be like us invading Afghanistan, forcing the warlords to become democratic. It doesn't work. That has to come from within the people.
Intelligent life forms beyond Earth are already aware of us.
We, the people, have to do it. We, the people, have to end all these big problems. It isn't enough to say we're all one people. We have to say we're all one universal people, because now we're dealing with intelligent life forms that aren't even human. Mm-hmm. So, and how do we transcend this tendency we all have to break into fighting little groups and become one peacefully? I think the answer is not necessarily religious, but deeply spiritual. This understanding that we're all conscious beings, and that consciousness and that spirit is actually universal, that the light in your eyes and mine and the awareness we have is the same awareness an ET from the Andromeda galaxy has. Even though they may look different, may have different IQs, different cultures, different colors, different shapes, different everything. Some don't even have, reproductive organs like we do. They're very, very different. I've seen a number of them. So I think what we have to begin to ask the question is, how do we become peaceful and not blow our planet up?
Yes.
Unless we can go beyond this divisiveness.
Yes.
And that's why I'm so concerned about this resurgence of division in our country and other places. The endless conflict around race, ethnicity, religion, things that are really external to the inner being of what it means to be not just human, but to be sentient, to be awake. And I think we really need to have a deep examination of how do we get to a post-racial, post-species civilization.
Their technology is more advanced than anything we can imagine.
Well, honestly, I don't necessarily think that there were ETs that made them. I think there could have been some extraordinary technologies that were used. For example, there is a record of technologies that existed on Earth, of civilization more advanced than we are now. And the question is, were there some use of some type of electrogravitic levitation technologies that were used? The other problem is, even when the Smithsonian paid $5 million to simulate using mathematics and the technology that archaeologists say existed back in the time of the pyramids, those obelisks like the Washington Monument, but those were all one big piece of stone, they couldn't raise the smallest one. With everything we know now about mathematics and engineering, with what's been postulated. So there's something that doesn't add up there. But I think it's a bridge too far to claim they were built by ETs. But they were certainly, their construction and the precision of the stones cut, how far they were moved, how they were put into place. There are a lot of questions I have, but I have no proof of how that might have happened, except the man I referred to earlier from Redstone Arsenal area, who is given material occasionally. It's not always extraterrestrial. He has been given objects that are tens of thousands of years old or older, that are technological, that have been found in the ocean and elsewhere, that were of human origin and were extremely advanced technologies. So I believe that it's likely that on Earth, prior to the modern era, there have been civilizations far advanced beyond where we are, that for which we have very little record. And when that record is found, I think it's kind of swept under the carpet. It's interesting. There were years ago when they did the Mars images, and they found that there were these obelisks and strange-looking objects on Mars. I went out to the Goddard Space Flight Center here outside D.C. to meet with Mark Carlotta and some other scientists there. And they said, yeah, it's been pixelated out for the public, but there are structures there. And though very ancient, but we're talking millions of years old, millions. And I was out in California after I had disclosed this to some people, and a man came up to me from JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs, and I didn't know him. He knew who I was and said, Dr. Greer, here's the issue. You're right, those exist, but we can't disclose that. I said, why? It's not an operational ET device. It's not, it's old. He says, yes, but you don't understand how powerful this information is. I said, why? He says, if this was disclosed, it would collapse the fundamentalist orthodox belief systems of every religion on earth. I said, what? This science and this evidence is being kept secret for religious reasons? He says, yes. Because the creation myths, now I'm not talking about most people, but those sort of fundamentalist orthodox belief systems, they'd all crumble. They'd be completely gone. And you would have to come up with something a little more rational, right? Than the world is 6,000 years old. And we, used to ride dinosaurs, like horses. If you go to the Creation Museum in Kentucky. So this is true, by the way. Those of you in urban areas, you need to kind of wake up a bit about the rest of the world. But that's just how it is. So what I tell people is that some of this evidence has been kept secret, not for scientific reasons, but for social belief and how much that information would disrupt most people's foundations of their paradigm and belief.
People around the world still refuse to think rationally and scientifically about those truths.
Because there are still huge numbers of people in our country and around the world who are not rational and scientific. They're really based on their these belief systems, which would be upended. And this guy was very blunt about it, and I think he's quite correct. For example, we might find out that the origins of Homo sapiens altogether isn't what we think, either Darwinian or other. So there are all kinds of implications to this issue. This is one of the things when I was out at Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch back when we were setting up things for the Clinton administration back in September of 93 out in the Tetons. And he took me out at night on the deck and he said, look, he said, Dr. Greer, no aspect of life on Earth will be unaffected by this being disclosed. So vast and so large are the implications. I said, yes, Lawrence, that's why it's been kept so secret. So now we're touching on another whole area of concern, and that is, now I don't think most rational religious and spiritual people would have a problem with the fact they don't think the world's 6,000 years old, and there's no reason for them to think that a supreme being would leave all his hopes for intelligent life just in humans. God help us, right? So, but, there are a large number of people and around the world, a significant number of people who would find that very upsetting. So that's been another consideration. It's easy for hyper-rational Westerners who live in urban areas to brush that off. But if you go around the world, and we're talking a world of 8 billion people, no, they're not all like you in New York.
And the thing is, how much leeway do employees have? Because it's clearly not being done by AI.
Despite the controversies and criticisms, its impact on public discourse, Joe Rogan stands firm in the face of his controversial opinions.
And there's a lot of angry, jealous comedians, unfortunately. And there's a lot of comedians that look at other people's success and they feel bad. So they think that you're doing something bad because they feel bad, because they don't like the way it makes them feel when someone's killing it. Like, a lot of comedians are narcissists, and a lot of them are very self-centered and egomaniac. And so they think that when you're doing something well or something's going well for you, that somehow or another it takes something away from them.
His broad reach has also sparked controversy, as he has been criticized for giving a platform to conspiracy theories and controversial figures.
This stuff is very subjective. So a lot of these kids that are working in these tech companies, they're coming straight from universities and they're super woke. And they think that people like DeStefano or people like you or me are a real problem.
He supports drug policy reform, particularly the legalization of cannabis and psychedelics, drawing on his own experiences and the potential mental health benefits. Rogan's role in the ongoing conversation about media, free speech, and the exchange of ideas remains pivotal as he continues to evolve and influence.
I think what they want is intellectual property. They want to steal data, and they want to, like, if they have access to your computer and say, what if you're working on some fucking weapon system? Or what if you're working on some communication system, and they have access to your computer, they can steal that data from your computer because they have access to it because you're using TikTok. Disturbing things are saying that they have access to computers that aren't even being used for TikTok. They had an engineer, software engineer, back engineered TikTok and said it was the most, in terms of like invasion of privacy, it was the most egregious example that they'd ever found. The terms of service is nuts. Just reading that any company that would try to sell you on social media. I mean, it's one thing to like say, oh, we're going to target ads in your direction. We're kind of used to that. Like, whatever. Like with Google and shit. Like, I don't mind if they send ads my way. But what they're doing is nuts. They have access to your audio. That means they have access to your fucking microphone. It's just impossible to change people's ways. They have to want to change. They have to be motivated. They have to. It's so hard to change people. It's like if you've ever had a friend that's been into drugs and it's been all fucked up and you can't get them to quit, or an alcoholic. It is almost impossible to talk someone into changing. They have to have some motivation that's internal.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with eating good. The best example you could set is by living your life in a healthy way. That's one of the best things about the internet. You get to see all these people that are doing things in a healthy way and doing things that are exciting and inspirational, and then it makes you want to do stuff that's good. It makes you want to take care of your body and makes you really want to concentrate on your mind and meditate and just really get everything in order. John Danaher wrote some really fascinating piece on his Instagram about routine, about how important it is if you're a great athlete. You say, you find me a great athlete, I'll find you someone whose life is governed by routine. And that this is the way to check progress, and this is the way to constantly be moving towards your goal. And I remember reading that, and I said to myself, this is something that I've always known, but never verbalized. I've never said it, but it's something that I've always known. Try to find a thing that you really enjoy. Try to find a thing that you're passionate about.
Like an activity.
Yes. For me, early on, it was drawing. It was illustrations. It was comic books. I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. And then it went from comic book drawing and illustrations to martial arts. But it was just another thing that I was very, very passionate about. And that was my vehicle out of my dilemma. That was my vehicle out of my own anxiety and trauma and my own issues and insecurities. And find something. Find a thing that you genuinely enjoy, because getting good at things you genuinely enjoy is extremely beneficial for young people, because it lets you know that, like, everybody thinks they're a loser. Every young person thinks they're a loser. At least a young person in the situation I was at. I didn't know I wasn't a loser until I started winning, until I started doing martial arts. Martial arts taught me that, like, I could get better at stuff, that I wasn't really a loser. I just was someone who was like in a fucked up situation. But you could channel all that energy that you have as a young person into something and get better at it. And then all of a sudden people admired me. I was like, this is crazy. So I went from being someone who was incredibly insecure and basically a failure to someone who was really successful at this one thing that was very dangerous, that other people were scared of. And that gave me immense confidence, and also a real understanding of the direct correlation between hard work and success. And also an understanding that you can't listen to people. Because even my parents didn't want me to do martial arts. They didn't want me to fight. They didn't want me to do stand-up. There's like, you have to understand like who you are And then in the face of other people's either criticism or, lack of faith in your ability to succeed, you push through, and there's great benefit in that. And then you realize that you can kind of apply that to other things in life. You can apply that to critics. You can apply that to social media commentators. You can apply that to a lot of things. Just give yourself an arduous, difficult task where you're challenged mentally and challenged physically. One of the great things about being challenged physically is it's also mental. The people that don't understand that have never really been challenged physically. People that think that physical challenges are just physical. It's just brute grunt work. It's not. It's emotional intelligence. It's understanding your desire to quit and conquering your inner bitch. All that stuff it's mental. It's playing out inside your head. And there's a mental strength that you acquire from that you can apply to intellectual pursuits. And the people that don't think that are the people that haven't attempted them. And there's an arrogance to people that only pursue intellectual exercises, only pursue intellectual things, and don't pursue anything physical. That the physical stuff is base, it's grunt work, it's primal, it's not necessary. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that obviously there's people like Stephen Hawking who have no opportunity to do anything physical, right? His physical dilemma is keeping his heart beating. But for most people, I think you can really benefit from physical struggle, and you benefit from it in a mental way. And I think that is overlooked. That's unfortunately overlooked by academics and intellectuals who they make excuses for why they're fat and lazy or scrawny. Did you see that lady on 60 Minutes? They interviewed her. She's some new woman who works in the White House. And they asked her about obesity. She said the number one cause of obesity is genetics. And it doesn't matter what you do. Like you could be a person who has a perfect diet and exercises and sleeps right, and you're still obese. Mm-hmm. And the health experts went fucking nuts. Like that's not what the data shows. The data shows that most people who are obese have obese parents, and they come from an obese family, but they're all doing the wrong thing. There's not like a person in that family that's eating grass-fed steak and running marathons and lifting weights and getting up at 6 a.m. and getting in a cold plunge and doing all these different things, but it's still fat as fuck.
Yeah.
And they're watching the calories in and calories out, and they're burning 1,000 calories a day in exercise, and they're still fat as fuck. That's not real. Like to say that and to say it on 60 Minutes, there's this weird thing going on where people want to say it's not your fault, and it isn't your fault. I mean, if you believe in determinism, if you believe in the impact of the people around you and the environment that you're in, which is most certainly real, the impact of your parents, the impact of modeling, you're modeling after other people's bad decision making, that's all real. That's 100% real. But to say that all obesity is just genetic is bonkers. That's a bonkers thing to say, and it discredits all these people that we know that were obese, that without surgery lost all that weight and looked great. Like Ethan Suplee, perfect example. There was a guy that was at one point in time like 500 plus pounds, right? Documented all of it, did it publicly because he was a fucking star. He's a famous actor, lost all the weight, now looks great, and did it through exercise and discipline and even like was really open about the fact that he gained a lot of it back a couple times. He went from 550 to 255. He did that. Wow. He did that himself. I mean, he did it, and he documented it, and he had to go through surgery to get the skin removed so that his, he wasn't like a flying squirrel, but he did it. And to say that it's all genetic, like, no, he had the same genes. Like, this is the same guy. It's not. There was some silly article on fat acceptance the other day, and it was talking, and then they got, which is fine. I accept people who drink. I accept all kinds of unhealthy choices. But don't lie to me. Just don't lie about the physical reality of what you've done to your body if you reach 400 pounds. That's not healthy. You're saying it's healthy. You're saying it's okay. No, you're just not dead yet. If you lost 200 pounds, you would feel wonderful. That would be healthier. Like, if you smoke every day and you're like, look, no cancer, smoking's healthy. No, your body is dealing with it. Your body's processing it. It won't be able to forever. That is exactly what's going on if you're morbidly obese. And for you to pretend any differently and to just go on about this fat acceptance movement and, the big, beautiful this and that. And like, no, you're obese. You've eaten too much food. If you see a fat guy, how come he doesn't get the same sort of treatment? If you see a morbidly obese man in his underwear, no one's saying he's beautiful. Because he's disgusting and he's fat and he's lazy and he's addicted to food. We all know it. But if it's a woman, we're so inclined to just let her go. She's fine. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. You're amazing. Give her space. We treat them as if they're incapable of recognizing the absolute reality of their physical being. Very possible that we all become genderless. Yes, I do think that's possible. Yeah. I think that might be what is happening with microplastics are changing people's hormone system. There's a book called Countdown.
That was nice of you.
By a woman. Her name is Dr. Shanna Swan.
Mm-hmm.
And she came on the podcast and she explained that there's certain chemicals that are in plastics and in some fertilizers that are disrupting the human body endocrine system. And it's causing people's penises to shrink, balls to shrink, sperm counts are lowering. And one of the ways they find out about this is the size of people's taints. In male mammals, the taint is 50 to 100% larger than female mammals. So when they pick up a gerbil, that's how they can quickly tell whether or not it's a boy or a girl, is by the size of the taint. And when the introduction of phthalates, it starts with a P, P-T-H-A-L-A-T-E-S, I think it's how you spell it. You say phthalates, and phthalates are a type of chemical that disrupts the human body, and because of the use of petrochemical products, the increase of phthalates into the human body from contamination has caused people's taints to shrink, balls to shrink, dicks to shrink, sperm counts to drop, and miscarriages to go up. And they think that if you think about that, that is causing gender to just kind of compress and to become more ambiguous. And in the future, if that continues to happen, what does that mean? What do we become genderless? And then what do we do to try to keep the human race alive? Well, we may revert to genetic engineering, some sort of a medical technological intervention, so we breed from splicing genes. What's crazy about this is, although this sounds nuts, we're talking about it now, for decades, people that have been abducted by aliens have always said that aliens are performing experiments and making hybrids with human beings because their genetic material has run stale, because they're breeding, or they're rather reproducing through genetic manipulation rather than through sex, because they don't have sexual intercourse anymore.
So they need our eggs and sperm.
They need all that stuff. They need our material. But because they don't have that anymore. So that might be where all biological creatures that develop technology, and technology in our case involves a lot of plastic. The more technology, the more plastic in the bodies, the more the bodies become genderless. We found a statistic that's a little misleading, but the statistic is every week the average person consumes a credit card sized piece of plastic through microplastics. Because what Putin is trying to do is command resources and control a country that used to be a part of the Soviet Union. And what happened yesterday is just beyond explanation, right? It's just a completely fucked up situation where a sick person got a hold of a bunch of guns and decided to go kill kids. And it happens in this country every now and then. It's how do you stop that? No one knows how to stop that. What is the answer? Is the answer take everyone's guns? Well, they're not going to give their guns up. So you're going to have only criminals are going to have guns. It's not going to be a good situation. And is the answer make schools these armored compounds where you have armed guards outside of every school dressed like it's a military? Boy, that's not something we want either. But what do you do to protect the children? And how many how many dollars is that going to cost? Like, do we even have the money to do that? Like, but the Oliver Stone perspective, when you're talking about the difference between the way we look at the rest of the world versus the way we look at our own actions, when you start bringing up Yemen is one that I've had Dave Smith on the podcast multiple times where he talks about it. Dave is very, very well read about Yemen, and it's a horrific scenario because no one cares. And it seems to me like not only no one cares, I mean, in the United States, this is not something that gets mainstream media attention on a daily basis, but the bombings are ongoing. Like we put up a chart once where they talked about the bombings that are happening in Ukraine versus the bombings that are currently happening in Yemen, and bombings that the United States is. It's wild because it's like swept under the rug, and we don't think about it, and we don't even understand why we're doing it. Like I guarantee you, if you just polled a random 1,000 people and say, "What are we doing in Yemen?" no one would have any idea. You'd have to have someone who really gets into this sort of esoteric, the details, like what is going on politically, what is going on economically. Someone like Dave Smith even might struggle with the full explanation of what our motivation, the military's motivation is to do this. But it's happening. And because it's not getting any attention, it's allowed to happen without scrutiny. It's allowed to happen without real mainstream criticism. If you comb the television news sources, cable, left and right, you're not going to find discussions of Yemen on a daily basis. But that is the one. If there's an area where we can't have that moral high ground, where we say, well, what about you? Like, why do we have those? Wouldn't it be better if the United States didn't have any of those that are unjustifiable? Where you could say, oh, the United States did this in Vietnam. Yes, we did, but it was in the 1970s. Well, that would be ideal in terms of like an example of learning and growing. And that, because the New York Times was trying to push this while the Ukraine invasion was happening. They were trying to push this thing that Ukraine was good and Russia is bad. And she was saying, well, this is one of the most corrupt countries on earth. So they said to her, like, where are you getting this information? They sent her an email, and she sent them back links to the New York Times and all these articles about how badly corrupt Ukraine was, which just makes me go, God damn, if I can't trust a fucking New York Times to get it right, like, you're supposed to be the paper of note.
What is real? If you could live in a perpetual dream, what's going on there? There's something happening, you're experiencing things. Things are happening. Whether you're lying there with your eyes closed or not, there's a bunch of shit that's going on, a bunch of experiences that your senses are taking in that are pretty fucking remarkably similar to real life.
Right.
Like, that's why it's so crazy, because it feels real. What if dreams aren't fake? What if they're just some alternative reality that you occasionally intermingle with when you're conscious, or unconscious rather? Like when you go into a dream state, maybe that's just like the shadow of something that just happened that was real. Maybe you have like these moments that seem like 8 hours to you or 5 hours to you, but you're really interfacing with some completely different timeline and some completely different reality. And the world is pliable. It's not locked down. Like rocks aren't rocks and water isn't water, but everything's fluid and changing constantly. And that's why when you're in these dreams, you freak out because all of a sudden, like, the physics of reality are gone. You're walking
snapped
through walls.
too into it, maybe.
Yeah. Well, there might be a war. Look, just the fact that this world exists in the state that it exists in. This world is very, very bizarre.
Right.
If it wasn't real, like if reality wasn't real, if we all lived in some sort of a black and white print version of life, and then you got to experience the life that you and I know, that's doing stand-up and being in LA and flying in planes and using the internet and experiencing life in the 21st century in 2017, you would be like, this is the craziest psychedelic trip. If you went to Times Square,
right,
and you had never experienced anything like human culture, and you went to Times Square, you would be freaking the fuck out.
Yeah, that'd be insane.
It would be insane. We're just so used to it. We're so used to it, we don't realize how bizarre the actual world is.
Well,
so
yeah, I mean,
it's possible that these dream worlds, that these are just different worlds that you tap into when you conk out. Could be you're running a series of lives. Like you have multiple lives going on, and your decisions you make in this conscious life affect all of them. And maybe you have other lives when you're asleep that are conscious when you're awake, but much like you're asleep and you don't remember what the fuck is going on, when they're asleep, they don't remember what the fuck is going on. And you interface, stand-up comedian, you might be an entity that interfaces with multiple different dimensions in the night. And you just don't remember it, just like you don't remember sleeping.
Right.
You don't remember dreaming. You don't remember a lot of shit that happens when you're conked out for 8 hours, right? Well, they probably don't remember when you're awake. And you're interfacing. You're not just shutting off. Like your brain wants to, everything needs to shut off so that your other self in this other dimension can interact. The mushroom growth that's in the Pacific Northwest,
Yeah.
the mycelium growth that's literally the largest physical organism that's on Earth.
That counts as one organism?
Yeah. They think of it as one organism, and it's conscious. It has a consciousness. It's communicating with plants. I mean, you know, fungus breathes air. Yeah, it breathes air. And not only that, it might have come here from panspermia. It might have hitched a ride. Spores exist. They can exist in a vacuum of space. They can exist at insane temperatures. They could have come here, like psilocybin and all these like psychoactive compounds that, you know, Terence McKenna believed were responsible for the development of the human brain, the doubling of the human brain over a period of 2 million years. That's his stoned ape theory. That might have come from outer space. If you were observing the Earth from afar, if you had no context, if you didn't understand the human species at all, if you were completely alien from it, you were a being made of light, and you're observing what these creatures do. Well, what's the predominant change-oriented creature on this planet? It's humans. And what do humans do? Well, it seems like they make better and better stuff. That's what they're always doing. And maybe that's what materialism is all about. Maybe our obsession with materialism is an insurance policy that fuels constant innovation. You know, like I have a phone, an iPhone, one of my other phones, that's 3 years old, maybe. When I use it, I can't fucking tell. But when the new one comes out, I'm going to be one of the first dorks to get it. Why am I going to get it? Because I'm a fucking idiot. Because I want the newest, latest, greatest shit. And I want to fuel this innovation. Well, why is that? What does it do? What are we doing? Well, we're eventually moving towards more and more capable things, more and more capable machines. We are the electronic caterpillar. We're giving birth to the butterfly, and we're making a cocoon, and we don't even know why. We're just fucking constantly trying to buy the newest. Oh, this one goes 0 to 16, 1.9 seconds. Whoa, gotta get it. You know, and we're constantly involved in this pursuit of technological innovation. Now, if you think of ideas, every single thing that exists on this planet, whether it's a mug or a house or a fucking windmill that creates electricity, all of those came out of the human imagination. All of them. You had an idea, a guy collaborates with this woman and she has an idea and her idea fits with your idea and it makes your idea better and more capable, and then you get together with a group of people, you form a startup, and your ideas all gel together, and you're working 16 hours a day around the clock to make the world a better place with this new idea and this new product and this new innovation, and everything gets better over time. Nobody goes, you know what, these phones we got here right now, we're good, let's just stop innovating. Let's tell Samsung and Apple, let's just leave it the way it is, and we're good with phones. And let's channel this into cancer research. The human race wants to innovate. It seems like the whole universe wants constant states of complexity. Just from the time the Big Bang exists, to multi-celled organisms, to conscious things that manipulate their environment like human beings. It's this constant state of ever-increasing complexity.